So without further ado, let me introduce our guest tonight. Wendell Shiffler, Wendy everybody calls him, is a retired high school science teacher who, with his wife Judy, moved to Fairbanks in 1968 for what they thought would be a 2-year commitment. More than half a century later, they still call Fairbanks home. In '81, he was named the Alaska Biology Teacher of the Year. While Wendy retired from teaching full-time in 1990, he didn't slow down. An adjunct instructor at the PE department here at UAF for 10 years. He also volunteered with the Alaska Arctic Winter Games, doing everything from making beds in the athlete village to serving as chef de mission for Team Alaska in 1992 and serving on the AWG's International Committee for 20 years as secretary and vice president. Wendy developed the Outdoor Experience Program through the Fairbanks School District. He volunteered for the ARCO Jesse Owens Games, the Fairbanks Food Bank. This is going to be a long list. I get exhausted just reading what you volunteered for. Anyway, on the borough's Trails Advisory Committee, and the Alaska Trappers Association named him Trapper of the Year several years back. A friend of mine actually said, you should know Wendy, because if anything happens in this community and you want somebody who knows how to get things going, you said, this guy's the one. So please welcome Wendell Shiffler.
I take my hat off to all the people out there that came tonight. You are brave. I can't believe you don't have something better to do tonight. Anyhow, thanks for being here, and it's fun to sit here and look out and see friends that we've made over the years, and I really am looking forward to sharing my life with people that don't know some of the things about me. So,
okay, the rap sheet, right?
The rap sheet, that's right.
Okay, well, let's start with a farm in Michigan.
Yep.
In southern Michigan. Tell me about early days there.
Well, is this mic on? No?
It's kind of going in and out.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. It turns green, and then it turns red, and then it turns green. Here we go. I was born May 17th, 1943 on a farm in southern Michigan, a couple of miles from the Ohio border. If you can picture Michigan, you've got Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan. There's a little jog in the state line there, and I was born on a farm about 2 miles north of that state line, and there were 7 of us kids.
Now, when you say you were born on the farm, it was on the farm,
yeah,
and wasn't your dad born in the same place?
Yeah, he was. I wasn't only born in the farm, but I was born in the house that my dad was born in. All 7 of us were born in that house.
Wow.
And when I say all 7, there were 4 boys, 3 girls. The oldest was Wallace. Then there was Leona, Lila, and Leela. And then there came Wendell, Walter, and Willis. So that was fine until I met Judy, and by that time the girls had married, but they had married Jim, Gene, and Jerry. And so Judy assured me that she wasn't going to try and keep up with everything, and it's taken her a long time, but yeah. So anyhow, my dad was a farmer. My mom was a college graduate, graduated from Worcester College, was a teacher. She ended up going to southern Michigan to teach for a couple of years, and she was a very young teacher. That's another story, but she showed up and met my dad and immediately quit teaching and started having kids. And those kids were pretty close together. My oldest brother and sister were born a year apart on the same day. The next sister was a little more than a year, and then the next sister was a couple of years, and then there was a couple of years for me, and then 5 years between my 2 younger brothers and myself. But we were all home, and we had a very good life on the farm. We all had jobs. We raised cattle. chickens, hogs, grain, cut the hay, baled the hay, and we all had jobs.
Wait, did you get to drive the tractor?
I did get to drive the tractor when I was big enough. When my feet could reach the pedals, that's when I started driving the tractor. And but I had all those farm jobs, different jobs, and as soon as one of my brothers and sisters got older, they got other jobs, and the younger kids got the jobs that they had, like carrying water to chickens and all sorts of stuff. So I had jobs at home, and I also worked for some other farmers when I was in high school and later. When my dad could give me up when we weren't doing something, then I would help other farmers do things, to hire out to do things. But I grew up there and went to a consolidated school district school in that area. You want me to go ahead and talk about graduation?
I just have a couple of questions, though, about that.
Yeah.
Because it strikes me the people who I've interviewed who were born on farms are extremely handy. And that seems to be a trademark of you. You have a reputation of being very capable with building and whatnot. Did you learn that on the farm?
I built lots of hog troughs, chicken nests, jobs that needed to be done, and I remember as a kid my dad giving me a hammer, a bucket of nails, and a board, and said start pounding, and pound these in as straight as you can. And one of the first things I built, I don't know if Judy knows this, was a salt block holder that had 4 pieces together. I saw the plans in Successful Farming, and I had a school project, and I pounded that thing together for this school shop project to put a salt block in for the cattle, to lick salt. And I did that as a really little kid. I had a lot of fun pounding nails. We built lots of stuff and fixed tractors and did all sorts of things.
Okay, so maybe we'll come back to that. But also, given you've been such an outdoor enthusiast, would you say that also came from that farming background?
Probably, but we worked, of course, on the farm you did a lot of, all your work was outdoors. You spent little time inside except milking cows and collecting eggs and stuff inside. But we did a lot of it was a lot of outside work, baling hay and, shoveling grain and driving tractors and rain or shine. You did it rain or shine. But not on Sundays. Sundays was a day of rest. And we didn't work on Sundays. I grew out of that a little bit. But
okay.
Yeah.
Now, going back to schooling, did you enjoy school?
Sure, I had a lot of fun at school. That meant that I wasn't working on the farm. I got a lot of guidance from my teachers. Obviously, many of them were mentors, and I had one, especially my basketball coach. I had one coach really throughout my high school sports career, and Don Eby. And he took a special interest in me. We had, as I said, we had a big family. I know one time I didn't have enough money to buy a pair of basketball shoes, and Mr. Eby helped with that deal. But my parents provided. It wasn't that tough. I make it sound like I really had it bad. I didn't. My parents provided a good life for us. We had everything we really needed. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we had everything we needed. And I credit them a lot for that. Yeah.
Now, in high school, you were a standout athlete in track, particularly. Was this mentor, the PE teacher, one of the inspirations that got you motivated that way?
Very much so. He took me, I had an opportunity, an interview. Oh, that's another interview I had at Michigan State University. He took me up there to interview with the coach, and that didn't pan out because I was a little fish in a big pond. But he went to this college nearby that was near my home and talked to the cross-country coach, running coach, and that gentleman came down and and talked with me and encouraged me to go to school there, helped me out a lot. And Don Eby was a big factor in my life in other aspects too. He was just a good person and a good coach.
Mm-hmm. And your interest in science, where did that come from?
I was sort of on a science path in high school. Took all the science classes and stuff, and then when I went to college, it was my major professor that really had an influence on me. I really didn't know what I wanted to do when I went to college. Actually, I didn't think I'd have the opportunity to go to college. It just wasn't in the books until I got to, be a senior, and my coach sort of spurred that on. And when I went to college, Dr. Kattenhusen was a professor of mine, and I started taking science, majoring in science. And I knew I wanted to coach. I knew I wanted to teach, and one of the pathways to being a coach was to be a teacher. Nowadays, lots of coaches don't teach. They're hired outside the school system, but that's not the way it used to be in our area. And so I got into that science network, ended up taking botany, all the science stuff, except ornithology. That's one class I was sorry I didn't take from Dr. Kattenhusen because he was a renowned ornithologist. But I had all the other stuff. And this little school I went to put out a lot of pre-med, pre-law, pre-dent people. And so I got in that class pattern and in the PE pattern, and there I was on my way to being a teacher.
Okay, so the science, I get that.
Yep.
You got scholarships, I'm guessing, for
Well,
track.
I sort of did.
Sort of did.
I sort of did. He made it possible for me to go my freshman year.
Okay.
Okay, and I ran and I did really well, and the head of the athletic department told me that I could get some financial help if I got a little better. So I went home between my freshman and sophomore year and ran and worked for the County Road Commission all summer, but at night when I got home, I would run to the Ohio state line, which was a couple miles away, and I'd do chin-ups on the state line sign and turn around and run home. And that was my summer training, and when I went back my sophomore year, I was ready to rip them up. And I did, and I got money I got a athletic grant, I guess, not maybe scholarship you call it, but I was one of the best runners until we got some other kids that were better than I was. And but that was great. And so I did have some help going to school, but I had a job too. I worked in the cafeteria.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
did you work through college?
I did. I went there my freshman year, and right away I got the job as a breakfast cook. The manager and the coach decided I could get up. I asked me if I could get up early in the morning. I said, that's not a problem. I've been doing that all my life. So I became a breakfast cook early and made the first tracks from my housing across campus to the cafeteria. And before long, the manager found out that I was going to be an asset to him, because that meant he didn't have to go in and unlock if I did.
Yeah.
And so that was that happened, and then I worked for the Saga Food Service, which was a service at that time, all through college, and I sort of progressed from a morning cook to a student manager to more responsibility and more responsibility. So when I graduated, they offered me a job as a manager of a cafeteria, which I took, and that's another story.
Okay.
We can talk about that sometime too.
But besides science and athletics, you made another discovery in college. Tell me about meeting Judy.
Yeah. Now would be a proper time to say probably I wouldn't be here tonight with you talking about all the stuff that I've done. And when I say I, it should be probably we, because she was there with me all the way. We have enjoyed a wonderful relationship where we've supported each other in all the stuff we've done. So having said that, I met Judy early on. My sophomore year, she was a freshman and showed up as a young first-year freshman, and I was a second-year college student, sophomore cross-country runner, and of course we were there for early practice, and the freshmen came early for a couple of days of orientation, and then there were some dances that they had, and of course we got to go to those dances because we were there, and that's when I met Judy. And in all honesty, for all of you to know, I met Judy, and after a little while, it was a done deal. So we dated all through college, and we were on our way.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, when you graduate, you eventually go to get a master's at New Mexico State, right? And it was in plant ecology. So why there and why plant ecology?
Well, I applied, after I graduated, I was a year ahead of Judy. I applied to, I thought maybe there's a year's difference and she needed to finish college. So I thought, well, maybe I could apply to go to graduate school, and we could still nurture the relationship and stuff. It ended up, I was getting drafted. I had graduated from college. This food service offered me a job as a cafeteria manager at Siena Heights College in Adrian, Michigan. I was a manager of that cafeteria of about 350 students and 60 nuns. That was exciting. and
I so want to hear
wonderful.
What, yeah.
So anyhow, I had I had that year, and so I decided to take the job of the cafeteria manager. I also applied for that teaching assistantship at New Mexico State University, was awarded that assistantship, but turned it down because we wanted to get married. So a way for us to do that was to stay in Michigan, let Judy finish college. And it just so happened that in the spring, I was ready to leave the food service. I'd had enough of that, and I was getting drafted. I took my physical, but fortunately, when I took my physical, I was rejected. Yeah, I was rejected. I had high blood pressure. And why did I have high blood pressure? I was afraid I was going to get drafted. Because the doctor that had given me my physicals all through college ended up being the doctor that I went to when I was rejected at Fort Wayne in Detroit and had to take the papers to have him sign. And I really wasn't interested in going in the Army, but the day I got back from the physical was the day we got a letter from New Mexico State University offering me that teaching assistantship. And along with it, a letter from Dr. Anderson, who was the head of the department, that said, if you come, would you like to stay in our home, take care of our house, while we are going to Michigan to do research on mushrooms? And I looked at Judy and I said, I'm rejected. It's an opportunity to go to New Mexico. You're going to graduate. We can get married. Let's go. And we agreed, and that's what we did. So we went to New Mexico. And plant ecology, again, ended up, I had all of the biology stuff that I needed to get into grad school. Actually, I was sitting better than some kids who had gone to some big name universities, who had worked under big name biologists, but didn't have the array of courses in biology that I had. So many of them had to take classes for grad school like botany and other stuff. And I had a real good preparation for that. And so a fellow by the name of Dr. Sandy Dick Petty was my major prof, and for some reason I sort of went to the plant area and ended up being got a master's in plant ecology.
So you should excuse the expression, what planted the seed to come up to Alaska from New Mexico?
Well, that's really good.
Yeah, thank you. I
The
planned
seed
that
was
all
planted.
night.
Yeah, I believe it. While we were in New Mexico, this same coach, Don Eby, did a family trip every summer with his family. And he said, you know, we'd like to come and visit you. And so we said, great, come and visit. Well, that was, 1965, 66, 66. 67 rolls around and they have a big flood in Fairbanks. But, so we're in New Mexico. They come and they said, well, you know, where are you going to go next? And I was in a program that would allow me to continue into a PhD program. My research was set up. I did research on desert plants, the phenology of desert plants. And that's a whole deal, whole other story. But they came and visited us and they said, well, where are you going to go next? And we said, well, we thought maybe we'd go to New England or, you know, somewhere to teach differently. And they said, well, we've been to lots of different states. Why? We've been to lots of states, all the states except Alaska and Hawaii. Why don't you think about going to Alaska? So we did. And to continue in that direction, we write to Alaska for jobs. And I had decided to stop at the master's level. Well, I won't tell you because, but anyhow, we stopped and we decided to come to Alaska or try to come to Alaska. We rode up here for jobs because Judy wanted to continue and get her master's degree. It was the only place in Alaska where there was a university you could do that, and it was here in Fairbanks. Then it was called University of Alaska. It wasn't UAF, it was called University of Alaska. And so I went ahead and applied to get into the grad school here for a PhD program. Got accepted, but decided I didn't really want to do that, but that was sort of a thing that I could maybe fall back on. And so we wrote back to Michigan to get letters of recommendation to send to Fairbanks. And it just so happened that one of the professors that we had at Hillsdale College, where we went to college, happened to be James Ryan. And Dr. Ryan taught ed courses after he had left here. He was Commissioner of Education, he was Territorial Commissioner of Eds, Superintendent of Schools in Fairbanks. So we write back to the president of the college, who I had served at many meals, coffee and plate dinners and stuff. And we wrote back to him for a recommendation, and he wrote back and said, I've asked Dr. Ryan to write a letter in your behalf. We had Dr. Ryan, and he told us he was superintendent and everything, but as college kids, that just sort of went right over our head. You know, we could care less what he had done. But so he asked Dr. Ryan to write a letter, and lo and behold, we get a letter back offering us positions in the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District.
Both you and Judy.
Yeah, both of us.
Wow.
No interview, no nothing.
Wow.
And little did we recognize the importance of it, I guess, when we went back to Hillsdale after we left New Mexico. We bought a bread truck in Michigan, a potato chip truck, like a UPS van to go to New Mexico. And when we decided to come to Alaska, we sort of said, well, how are we going to get here? And Judy says, well, let's take the truck. I said, you've got to be kidding me. We're going to drive that truck all the way up. Well, let's give it a shot. So we did, made some changes, went back to Michigan, and Dr. Ryan, we visited Dr. Ryan. Did any of you know Dr. Ryan? If you knew, raise your hand. Dr. Ryan. We visited him. The president, we went to visit the president and thank him, and he said, well, you got to go see Dr. Ryan. So we see Dr. Ryan, and he says, is that your car out there? We said, uh-huh. And it was a little black VW. Oh. And he said, and he asked Judy, where are you teaching? And she said, North Pole Elementary School. And he said, I don't think you're going to make it at 50 below zero. And so we left there, and by the time we got to Fairbanks, her teaching assignment had changed from North Pole Elementary School, North Pole Elementary School to Denali Elementary School. And when we walked into Dr. Derwalker's office, he said, Dr. Ryan got on the phone and said, don't you let that little girl drive to North Pole. You find her a different job. And he did. So, and Dr. Ryan really, that was networking before networking was called networking, But we were very fortunate, and we have been very fortunate throughout our lives here in Fairbanks by knowing people, helping, and anyhow.
Yeah. So when you got here, very different climate from New Mexico, obviously.
Yes, it was.
That's right.
And there were no dresser drawers with the bottom drawers any good because they'd all been flooded and warped. And fortunately, we did get an apartment at Fairview Manor.
Pretty close by.
By the schools. I taught at Lathrop. I had a job at Lathrop. Judy was at Denali, and so we parked the car and the bread truck. The potato chip truck was our freezer, and we got an apartment at Fairview Manor. And we were fortunate to do that because there was only a couple apartments left. We got here 3 weeks before school started.
Wow.
So I did have another interview with with Mr. Scudlow, who was the manager of the apartments there. And I asked for a job. We rolled into town with a couple $100 in our pocket. And we had to have an apartment, and apartments were like $200 a month rent, month's rent in advance, a month's rent deposit, month's rent this, and I told him we don't have enough money. And so he hired me for 3 weeks. We had teaching contracts, so he hired me for 3 weeks to mow lawns. So I mowed lawns at Fairview Manor with a hand mower, and by the time I got to one end, it was ready to start over to do the other one. So I did that for 3 weeks, and he gave us a job, and that's where we lived the first year. Until, I'll let you ask another question because it'll lead right into that, I'm sure.
Oh, well, but I'm going to talk a little bit about teaching.
Yes.
So maybe you should finish the
Other
domicile.
Story?
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, what happened was, it'll follow along with what we're talking.
Okay.
What happened was, we took the little black Volkswagen to a shop one time to get fixed. We live in Fairview Manor, and we went to Al's Beetle Shop, which was south of Airport Road in a little triangular. There was a Lions triangular park there, and he apologized for not having parking space there, and in that parking area, proposed parking area, were 3 cabins. And he told me that he was going to burn those cabins down to have more parking space. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. And he says, nope, we're going to burn them down. They had mud up the walls about halfway, about the height you would think from the flood. And I said, you can't do that. And he said, well, would you like one? Would you like them? And I said, well, yeah, the wheels are turning. So I go to some of the teacher friends, one who's sitting right here, Mr. Henderson. I go to Dick Henderson, and I take him over here, and I ask Dick, would you be interested in one of those cabins? He goes, no. They had property out on Chena Hot Springs Road. You tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm right. I know I'm right. And I went to him, and he says, no. I went to Roy Marburger, who had property out there, Steve Lackey. We didn't own any property. No, we rode motorbikes over and looked at them, and I said, no, I don't want anything to do with those. So I went back to Judy, and I said, Judy, most people get property, and they build a cabin. We have a cabin, but we don't have any property. And so that's what spurred us to look at in Muskoka subdivision. There was a piece of property where we live now for sale, and we bought it from a lady by the name of Willie Rensenbrink, and paid $7,000 for that 5 acres of land in Muskoka subdivision.
Wow.
Yep. And
you had to disassemble?
And we tore the cabin. Yeah, that's right. So I got some high school runners of mine, and who said, "Oh, here." He knows. So I got some high school runners, Barney Harrod, Richard Joy, some kids that were on my cross-country running team. And they said, well, we'll help you, Mr. Shiffler. You know, and it took us a day or two to rip the roof off that had sawdust in it. We ripped the logs apart, put them in the truck. Barney had a truck. We hauled them out to 929 Reindeer Drive, dumped them off, and then we reassembled that cabin. So if you visited us today, you'd see our first home in Muskok subdivision, and many people here have seen that. Yeah.
So what I can't help but ask, do you have to label everything so you know
Well, I sort
how
of
to
did.
reassemble it?
I didn't really label them. I sort of put a plan together on a paper plate of when I tore it apart and put them in the truck. And I labeled them. Yeah, they had numbers on them with a crayon, but I lost the paper plate. And so I had to sort of figure out. Ann T's here. Anyhow, I had to figure out what to do, and we changed some walls around. It didn't have a closet. We put a little closet on the outside that held our clothes, and got it up off the ground, and we put that cabin up, and that was our first home.
Wow.
Yeah, until we had twins.
And that changes things.
Yeah, that was 14 by 15 or 16, and we lived in that cabin a year and a half with the girls while we were building a new house on the same property.
And you built that?
Me and a whole bunch of people that, some were probably here, that helped me lift logs and peel logs and stuff, yeah. We built that, and then in 1986, that home burned. We had a fire.
No one injured?
Judy and I were at school, and I got a phone call that her house was on fire, and we lost that house, but the Fairbanks community was absolutely unbelievable and helped us out tremendously. I had students that helped, that were working on the pipeline, that offered me money, that I went to my principal, Mike Thibodeau, and said, what do I do? And anyhow, it was just unbelievable. Maida, I was teaching with you then, wasn't I?
I remember
Yeah.
that day very well.
Yeah, and I left and ran every red light on Airport Road and picked Judy up at U Park School, and we went out there, and yeah, it was quite a traumatic experience. The girls were freshmen in high school, but it was one life experience that we learned from, and you know, there were many, many good things that came out of that whole experience. And some of the people are here tonight that remember that helped us with that, helped us through that.
Well, as I understand it, it's the sense of community that kept you here for more than 50 years.
Yeah, well, we came for 2, and the rest is
It's
history.
stuck. Yeah, right. Okay, let's get to teaching then.
Okay.
Okay, did you start coaching right away, and were
I
you
did.
teaching science right away?
I did. I was assistant cross-country coach my first year and track coach. And then the second year, I was made head coach. And I coached the next 2 years until I got involved building a house. And then I also decided to sort of switch jobs. I switched teaching jobs. I taught at Lathrop for 4 years, from 68.
And was this when they were double shifting?
Well, not quite then. This was before double shifting. And I just went to a reunion the other day and talked to those kids, those old people now. And those kids were very resilient and strong, because it was crazy then. Lathrop was a school that was built for about 800 kids, and at the time we had 1,600 kids roaming the halls. And I ended up teaching earth science, one class in the upstairs auditorium foyer. That's upstairs at the Herring Auditorium in the foyer. I was supposed to teach earth science. Little books, little materials, little this, little that. Day to day, you're doing what you can do, and you still see, 250 kids a day. was pretty exciting. And so then I had the opportunity to teach to, at the time, Irene Clayworth had written a grant to work with kids who were dropping out of school. And we had lots of kids then that were leaving high school. As you can, realize that they were getting pipeline jobs, school was not important, they didn't care about school, parents would bring them to school, they'd drop them off and they'd go out the back door. And it was a tremendous challenge to teach during that period of time because you had lots of kids in need, you didn't have room. So anyhow, I had the opportunity. Irene had written this program for kids who were dropping out of school, and at the time it was a career extension center, and they needed a science teacher. Ann Tremorillo's husband was a good friend of mine because we played basketball together, we did all these other things. He was a coach, and he had decided to move to that program from a job at the university, and he called me up and said, "We need your help, we need you." So I was encouraged to take that job, and I remember, I was at Lathrop in the faculty room, and I mentioned to a teacher who was a senior teacher, much older than I, she was an English teacher, and I had told her I was going to the alternative program. And she looked at me and she said, "Mr. Shiffler, how can you go to that program and work with those losers? Because these are kids that have dropped out of school." And I told her, I said, "You don't have an idea. I'm sorry, but you don't have an idea about teaching. That, like, we don't think a lot alike." And so anyhow, I went to that program, and it gave me an opportunity to really grow as a teacher because it was a one-on-one program and one-on small group program. We had lots of freedom to develop curriculum, classes, all sorts of stuff to try to keep the kids interested. And most importantly, it was on a one-to-one basis where I could work with kids and sit and talk with them and look at them eye to eye and encourage them to go to school and find a purpose in learning, getting an education. And these were kids that that were 16, most of them were older than 16, but they could get pipeline jobs, as a laborer. Many of them were emancipated youth, and many of them just didn't want to march to the drum of buzzers and time constraints. So what we did is we ran that program, and that allowed me to grow as a teacher in a different way.
You said that teaching was learning. What did you mean by that?
Well, I learned a lot from those kids. I learned a lot about how to work with students and how to listen to them, how to appreciate where they are at that period of time. And at the same time, I was required to learn as a teacher. I had to take recency credits in classes to keep my teaching certificate current. So I was allowed to take courses in a wide range of areas. And it just so happened that at the same time our district was involved in outdoor education. And that led then to me to apply for sabbatical leave and grow more and more in that program. And to develop the outdoor program, which Maida has a t-shirt on. Maida Buckley was one of our teachers that went, that I
We would vie for these patches.
Yeah.
We would see who could go on the next trip with you and Mary Jo.
Yeah.
It was very competitive among the rest of the staff.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, we had some wonderful times with kids, and to this day, there's kids that see kids. They're adults. They're close to my age, but anyhow, it was a wonderful opportunity to take kids to the outdoors, teach science in the outdoors, get staff like Maida and Melinda Gordon and other people who I could get to go with me to carry a pack and as a staff go and get the support of the school board to take these kids to the outdoors. And it's, some of the best kids in the world were friends of mine. I'd like to just name one. Patty Mongold, who is the president of Mount McKinley Bank, was a student of ours. And David Mongold, her husband. It just so happened they were madly in love and they really didn't want to go to school. So they ended up at our program.
I have a question about, well, but you eventually wrote a grant to explore these kind of alternative programs,
I
right?
did. And I found out that the state of Alaska, with the support of the school district, would grant a sabbatical leave to learn more about this field. So I did. I wrote a program up, submitted it to Mr. Chuck Smith, submitted it to the state of Alaska, and this time we had two little girls that were just about ready to enter school. Judy was not teaching at the time, and the program had to do with the study of alternative schools. And alternative schools at the time were just they were called alternative schools because they were different than the traditional program. And so we took a year. The first half of the year I worked in a program on the northwest side of Chicago in Wheeling, Illinois, and I taught at Rolling Meadows High School in a night class to give us a little extra money. With that sabbatical, I got half my salary paid for by the state of Alaska and the school district. The second semester, we started on the East Coast in Boston, and I had a book of a list of alternative schools. At that time, they published this list, and I visited 50 alternative programs around the United States from coast to coast to sort of see where we stood in Fairbanks at our school. What I found out is we were not behind anybody else. We had a staff of people like Maida and Melinda Gordon, people who were excellent teachers in our program. And what I found out was that the schools outside had taken many of their teachers who were ineffective and not doing a good job, and they were sticking them in these alternative programs. And lots of times I would go to that program to interview, and the school was closed. They had already shut it down. And so I learned a lot during that year, came back to Fairbanks, and during that time I did take an outdoor ed class where I did some winter camping in the Colorado Rockies. Took a outdoor ed program class, building snow caves and stuff like that. And I thought, when I got back, I thought, man, we ought to try some of this with some of our kids. And we did. And I think that it was successful, and it was successful enough that sort of during that time I got that biology award, a little bit later. And also got our school sort of going in a direction of giving kids credit for doing things in the outdoors. And when we went to the outdoors, we also did English and math and social studies, and we did a lot of work in preparation because the kids, we developed what we call a personal growth contract that the kids signed to these were the things they needed to meet an obligation for their credit, and those who did that got credit. So they got high school credit for doing that, PE, and social studies credit. And anyhow, we had a good run at it, and enough that I applied for another sabbatical leave 7 years later, having to do through this district and the state. And I was awarded a leave there to do stuff in an outdoor adventure education, what was called experiential education. And I ended up learning and working with some national figures that became good friends of mine and came to Fairbanks and did workshops. And that gave me another boost in my teaching career.
Mm-hmm. This is going to seem like a softball question considering where we live in the audience here, but it strikes me that a lot of kids, things like hunting and fishing and they're always looking for young people to get involved because fewer and fewer seem to be have this active engagement with the outdoors and the wilderness. And so I'm wondering what your views are. I mean, as computers and social media predominate in so many kids' lives, heck, in our lives too, many times, what do we lose by something like that, do you think, Wendy?
Well, we didn't have cell phones then. We didn't, they couldn't take tape recorders and listen to music and stuff like that. And we did a lot of looking at the outdoors objectively and studying about animals and the relationship that we have with the outdoors. I enjoy taking my grandkids outdoors. They enjoy it. I think kids enjoy it now. I don't know if they get the opportunity to do it as much as, I don't think they get the opportunity in school to do it. We did lots, we used to be able to do lots of field trips. I don't even know if they do field trips now in school where they go to out, into the community. They probably come to the university or they can bring people in. But even now, I go as a trapper, I end up, I got a permanent substitute teaching license. At the time I retired, you could do the coursework and get a permanent substitute teacher's license. I left the classroom and I have been in the classroom, but not as a substitute, not one day. I've gone in to talk about animals. I've gone to biology classes to talk about, different animals and their the relationship with the environment and so forth. But I don't know about biology classes now. What they, I used to take some of the animals that I trapped in and we would dissect them. And I even gave some teachers some marten carcasses to use because they can't use those now in formaldehyde, and I don't know what they do now. How they teach that that hands-on stuff. And the trips that we did minimum impact camping. There was one trip that we went on. May, did you go on the Nome Creek trip? Where we would always, when we get ready to leave, we would always, I'd say, we're going to be out here at 8:30 to start walking and carrying our pack. At 8:30 we'd be ready to go, and if there are kids that weren't ready at 8:30 and it took them 20 more minutes, that meant we got up 20 minutes early the next day to be ready to go. Well, it didn't take them too long to figure out we needed to be ready to go. And I had some kids, one young lady that didn't clean up the campsite like they were supposed to do. We practiced minimum impact camping so that when we left, we tried to leave that area like it looked when we got there, which is very hard to do when you have an impact on an area. And I had one young lady leave her camp stove. They'd bring their packs out and then we would go and check the areas to see if they had poofed them. We call it poofing the campsite. And here was a camp stove and everything. And I told them, I said, what you leave, I'm packing up and taking out. And here was really a nice small backpack stove. And she decided not to take it. And I said, well, I'm packing it up and we're not leaving it, we're carrying it out. But you don't get it when we're back out there. It'll go into our pool of equipment and stuff like that. And so we tried to practice having consequences with our decisions that we make out there. And
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you raised this question about when you leave teaching the school district, you start teaching here at the U as an adjunct, or were you doing it at the same time?
I was, for a short period of time. The second sabbatical I had, there was an individual here, head of the department, Terry Tomsack, was the head of the PE department, when they had a PE department here. They no longer have a PE department at UAF. To get a degree in physical education, you have to go to Anchorage or somewhere else. And I wrote, during that second sabbatical, I wrote up a class that teachers could take, university kids could take, the curriculum for this outdoor camping class, learning to take kids to the outdoors and planning a trip. And I got the registrar and the head of the PD department to approve it. And so I taught that class, and we had like 35 people in there. So that was sort of an additional thing on that sabbatical leave. But then, because of that, they needed an instructor in PE 307, which was Techniques of Camping and Outdoor Recreation, and in Principles of Track and Field. So I had that opportunity to act as an adjunct in that area for about 10 years. And it was wonderful working with those college students.
Is there a difference between working with kids that are a little more mature and taking?
There is, but you still have college kids that think they don't have to come to class. Mm-hmm. They don't need to write papers. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. So you still have to, you have to make the classes interesting, and you have to let them know that there's a responsibility that goes with taking your class. And I would tell them I would work very hard to come there every day, every time, to be as good a teacher as I could. And I expected them to do the same thing as students. That was their job. And so there's differences, but there's many things about it that are very similar too. Mm-hmm.
Sure. Okay, I want to talk about some of your volunteer work too. Mm-hmm. How did you get involved with the Arctic Winter Games?
Well, when the Arctic Winter Games started...
And I totally got to find out the title.
Chef de Mission.
Chef de Mission.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. I see John Estel back there. John is involved with Arctic Winter Games now, and he was involved for many years. But when the first Arctic Winter Games was held in Fairbanks, our girls were little and they needed volunteers. And so we decided, as a family, we would make beds out on Fort Wainwright, which was an athlete's village. And so that was our job. We made beds every day. And then they had, Arctic Winter Games has grown into sleeping bags and cots and stuff like that. Then they had beds because the military provided that. So we made beds, Station, Stephanie, Judy, and I. That was one of our jobs as volunteer. Then the next set of games, our daughters were old enough to participate, and we took more of a leadership role in cross-country skiing and so forth. And so we had volunteer jobs in that area. I was in charge of awards out at Birch Hill. And so that was my role there. Then after I retired, we're talking about the third go-around, because there's a rotation in which communities host games or have the opportunity to host games. And so after I retired, I applied to be the chef de mission, the chief of the mission for Team Alaska. And there are three major components to Arctic Winter Games. There's the International Committee, which is the overall governing body. And I tell people the International Committee is like the Olympic National Committee, only we didn't take bribes. Okay. Secondly,
darn.
Yeah, I know. Secondly, there is a host society, and that's where the games are held. That community accepts the responsibility of hosting the games. And when the kids get off the airplane, the kids, the coaches, and everybody gets off the airplane, it's their responsibility for their health, their food, their safety, and everything till they get back on the plane. So that's the host society's job, and that's what Fairbanks does when they host the games. That's what the Wasilla area is going to be doing for the next set of games. They are going to be acting as the host society. And that, in a way, is good for that community, because to become a host, you have to do a survey of your community to see what can be used by Arctic Winter Games. And so just the process of applying to be a host is good for the community. Okay, then you have the team that is made up of athletes, coaches, mission staff, and that's the role of the chef de mission. You are the chief of the mission. Even when the games are held in the host area, you're still in charge of your athletes, finding the athletes, getting the composition of the teams together, finding the coaches.
It's a big responsibility.
It is. They're all volunteers. And so it was a real challenge. And my challenge, I wanted to provide an athletic activity that was going to be the best that could be provided to those kids. That was my goal when I became chef de mission. So I served in that capacity for one set of games. The next set of games at Grand Prairie, Alberta, I went as a member of mission staff. Another individual did the chef de mission's job. And I went as mission staff. And after that set of games, I was approached to be on the International Committee by other members of the International Committee. And so I was fortunate in that respect that I received that appointment through the state of Alaska. There are two individuals in the state of Alaska who represent Alaska, Team Alaska, the state of Alaska, on the International Committee. And I was one of those, and I did that for 20 years. That individual now represents us, and that's John Essel back there, who is in that role. And it is a big responsibility because you're not only responsible for you're responsible for everything. Mm-hmm. You're responsible
24/7.
But you're responsible for determining who gets to host the games. That's done 4 years ahead of time in the process. 2-3 years ahead of time. You're responsible while the games are going on, so you're there. You meet every day, sometimes twice a day. If there's problems, they need the guidance of the International Committee. You're there for the games, so that meant you had that, and so you have this rotation thing going on with the games being produced, year after year after year, even though they're only every 2 years. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of responsibility. I met some absolutely wonderful people in government. I had a channel open to the Lieutenant Governor. The Lieutenant Governor is the individual here that's in their portfolio. The Arctic Winter Games is sort of in their jurisdiction, so they go to the games every year and represent the state at opening ceremonies. You see the politicians get up and wave, I'm here, and then they leave and come back. But you have an opportunity to work with some really, really fine people, and all over the circumpolar north. So,
okay, we're running.
we're not running out of time, are we?
Oh no. But I do want to ask you about being Trapper of the Year and your trap line. Mm-hmm. So,
what is it about?
How did you get into trapping, and where's your line?
Well, I started trapping pretty much right after I got up here. I was a farm kid, and I was a biology teacher, and I had butchered animals, and on the farm we ate what we killed, we hunted, we fished, and we ate what we got. I'm not a catch and release fisherman. What I catch, I eat, and try to do that with trapping too. We've eaten beaver and lynx, and so I got involved with trapping with another individual. We had a trap line on the other side of the Tanana River, down from Bonanza Creek. The road at Bonanza Creek went down to the river, and we went across there and had a trap line over there, which I didn't know much about it, and I was going with him. He left after 1 year and moved outside, so I sort of had that area. The areas that you trap in, unless you purchase the right to trap there, which isn't very often, but many old trap lines are sold from one individual to another. Most of them are on state land or federal land, now on native land. So we had that area there. He left, and so I had a friend. We had talked about trapping, and we said, well, why don't you and I do this together? And we did. And we trapped on the other side of the river, but we hated going across the river. It's a dangerous river when it's freezing up and you don't know where it's frozen and not frozen. We would always try to follow moose tracks to get over there. We trapped over there for a few years and decided to look around. And we found an area up off the Elliott Highway. I'll tell you this for the whole world to know. Mile 42 and 51, there are pull-offs. And my trap line partner is Mr. Henderson, Richard Henderson, who's sitting in the second row right over here. He's as guilty as I am. So we are trappers, and we have trapped together for close to 50 years. And it's a wonderful relationship that you have with the outdoors, with the land, with the life. And being a biology teacher, you know, you have to understand how the animals live, what they eat, where they go, what they do. And it was sort of a natural with my farm kid background and butchering, and I hunt and try to get moose. And so we do that. We kill it, we butcher it, we clean it up. And it just so happened in 2021, I was honored to be selected the Trapper of the Year. What do you do to get that? It's sort of a recognition thing of who you are and what you do and how you act. And, you know, you would really be surprised the number of people that would look at me being on the International Committee for Arctic Winter Games and they say, "You trap? You are a trapper? You are, you know, that individual?" And I go, "Uh-huh." So you have to, you teach them about it. And
You're sort of an ambassador?
in a way. And so having that honor, I'm proud to have received that honor from that organization of which I've been a member of. I'm a lifetime member number 4, so that we were here, and my trapping partner is right behind me. And we have been involved. We've been involved in a speakers bureau where we go into the classroom and talk with kids, not about necessarily killing the animals, but understanding their way of life and how they fit into the whole picture. And the kids that we went on the outdoor experience knew, you know, we did that. And so it is sort of a way of life that you live in that capacity, but it's like anything. It's how you live it and what you do with it. And so it's an honor, yeah.
Well, before I turn you over to the audience for their
you're not
question-
going to do that today.
Oh, come on. Anyway, I do want to ask you,
Yes.
I mean, considering the great relationship you and Judy have, what's ahead for the two of you?
The rest of our lives. I mentioned a little bit about it, you know. We've got, Judy and I had twin daughters. We were fortunate to have twins, Stacia and Stephanie. We've been together for now 58 years or more because of the years we dated in college. And we're fortunate enough to respect each other, love each other enough that we sort of do our own thing. And Judy travels a little bit more than I do. I'm perfectly happy. I don't have a bucket list of things to do, when, and all that stuff. We have traveled a lot together. We've done a lot of trips together. In 2021, we did Wendy's Cultural Enhancement Tour, which was a 5-week trip? It was a week longer than I had anticipated.
A lot of culture.
She lied to me. But anyhow, we were there a week longer than we had planned on, traveling around Europe and revisiting. I did get to go to Greece when I was in college. I went as a goodwill ambassador of my college to Greece for a summer, and that was a lifelong, it was a wonderful experience. I don't know what else I could tell you other than, you know, Judy and I, do we argue? Uh-huh. Do we discuss things viciously sometimes? Uh-huh. Do we do this? Uh-huh. But we have had a wonderful relationship, and it will continue, and we've got the support of our kids and many of these people out here. So, yeah.
So let's test that support
Let's
now,
see what
Wendy,
we've got here.
and see what kind of questions they provide
I'm
you.
ready. Yeah.
All
Come on,
right.
you guys. John Estel.
Yes, in addition to your many skills, you are also a jewelry maker.
So we
Oh,
asked
yes, I
a
am.
jewelry maker.
Yes. Well, a few years ago, well, probably 20 some years ago, I didn't know this. I taught biology for all these years. I didn't realize that many fur-bearing animals, many animals had a bone. The male animals had a bone in their penis. And so I discovered this during the skidding process and figured, maybe I could figure out a way to use this small little bone.
The
An oocyte.
Yeah.
Yeah, an oocyte. The scientific name for it is a baculum. B-A-C-A-L-U-M or L-A, depending upon plural or whatever. Baculum. And so I removed those, and I volunteered. That's another volunteer job I did at Fish and Game. Randy Zarnke, who was the disease specialist at Fish and Game at the time, asked me if I would come in and take some measurements off of these marten that he had the trappers come in. Hi, Joe Sweeney. I see you over there. He was one of my biology students many years ago. And so I went into the Department of Fish and Game, the lab there, and he had trappers bringing in these animals, of which I would measure the skulls to determine by skull shape the developmental stage that these animals are in, where they, youth, adult, male, female, and so forth, to develop a plan so that trappers could sort of collect data, because Fish and Game can't do all of this.
Sure.
You guys know there's a small office over there, and they're in charge of this big area. So I did that for the, I would get all of the penis bones off of those animals. So I had a collection, a whole bunch of penis bones, and I decided I would make earrings out of them. I got all of the materials for the fish hooks and all that stuff, experimented with it, and I made 4 pairs of earrings. I made a pair for my wife, I made a pair for Stacia, made a pair for Stephanie, and I made a pair for Margaret Bennett, my next door neighbor. Stacia and Stephanie at the time were in junior high. They said, "Dad, you are nuts. You are crazy." My wife said, "I don't know about that." And Margaret Bennett said, "I will never wear these." And I said, "Margaret, would you please wear them to my funeral?" And you know what she told me? She said, "I hope I die before you do." So over the years, I have made hundreds of pairs of these earrings. Some of the people in this audience have them as gifts, and my doctor bought 10 pairs of them to give at Christmas one year. And they are, if you ever go to Iceland and you go to Reykjavik, Iceland, they are in the International Museum of Philology in Reykjavik,
They have a
Iceland.
jewelry wing there, do they?
They have a penis wing there. It is it's all penis bones from all these animals.
I see.
And at the time we were in Iceland, it was in Húsavík, which was a little city on the northern community, but since then it has moved to Reykjavik. They are there, and I don't know if any of you have ever been there, seen them, but I am proud to be a fellow of the museum, International Museum of Philology. I have a certificate, the whole deal.
You
It's
know,
quite an exciting-
It's tough to put that on a resume, isn't it?
I know. It's not as tough as you think it is.
I can see
Thank
why you
you.
got hired.
Yeah. Anyhow, I'd be happy to answer any more questions. It's wonderful to see you here tonight, and it's wonderful to see the faces of people I know. Judy Tolbert. Yes, Judy Tolbert.
Well, I think it would be good for everyone to know about your work with Relay for Life.
Relay
Thank
for
you.
life.
Yes, I am a cancer survivor. I have had prostate cancer, and so I decided when they first did the Relay for Life that I would have a team of guys. Well, that was my first mistake, because my wife said, "Well, what about us?" So she ended up having a team of her own. But I had a Relay for Life team that in the early days raised a lot of money. I had my head shaved one time when they raised $40,000, and it went from $40,000 to $100,000 to $200,000, and it was a big event. And I had a team of about, I'm going to say, 30 or 40 guys, but they had to pay $100 to be on my team. And they came and walked. Many of them are here. Tim Waller was one of my sponsors. You know, it was wonderful. And so I had a team every year for a long, long time. I haven't had a team, but I still go and walk. I try to walk every year because that's a very good cause, and we raise lots of money for the American Cancer Society. The administration of that event has changed over the years. It shifted from a Fairbanks event to sort of an Anchorage run event where a lot of the money didn't stay here in Fairbanks, and so there was another organization, Interior Alaska Cancer Association, that formed that, you know, sort of took over that portion of getting people there. But so I did have a Relay for Life team, and that was a lot of fun. It was a 24-hour event. Judy had a team of, I don't know, hundreds of women. It was crazy. Lots of people involved, and a wonderful event to raise money for the American Cancer Society. Yep.
And I'll bet you a great venue for selling earrings.
Well, I didn't really push those earrings
Yeah.
too much. Did you get that, push those earrings? But anyhow, it was a neat event. And,
Yeah.
you know, many people here now know about the earrings, and it's a one-person deal. It's me. I'm the production crew. Whenever I need a new bunch of earrings to go for sale, I got to produce them. So it's getting more difficult now with the older I get with my hands and eyes and all that stuff. But thanks for bringing it up, John. I'm sure sales will pick up.
They are a wonderful gift for people in the lower 48 who don't know about traffic.
Right.
Great conversation.
But I tried it. It's like the Usiks. You go to the museum and you see the big walrus ones that are scrimshawed and have gold inlays and all that stuff. So this is,
It's sort of a variation on that.
it's very unique.
Yeah. Okay, well, it's 1:15 here. There's wonderful, let's see, ice cream and cake in the foyer there, and beverages. So we can visit with you
Sure.
after that.
Sure. I want to say hi to, I know this is being recorded.
Oh,
Yeah, so I have two grandchildren.
We're cutting out
I have
the
three
earring part.
I have three grandchildren: Isa in New Mexico, Silvana, and Rio, who are from Louisville, Kentucky. I said I'd say hi to them, and our wonderful daughter, Station Stephanie, and my lovely wife, Judy. So thank you all for being here tonight. And I want to thank Michelle for the opportunity to be able to sort of tell my life story. This is really the first time I've been able to do that, other than all the kids that I've had in school and all that, you know. But Judy mainly is putting together a memoir thing for our kids, and she's working diligently on it, and I'm trying to help as much as I can. And so I've had a little bit of practice recalling all this stuff, but I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Well, Wendy,
and having
thank
people
you.
here. Yeah, thank you very
Let's
much.
hear it for Wendell Shiffler.
Yeah.